Good morning, everyone. Welcome to myPM community discussion panel about the hybrid project management. My name is Stanimir Sotirov, and I will be your host for today's event. We will talk about the hybrid project management, how it's used, and when it makes sense to apply hybrid project management as such. In the beginning, we will cover the combination patterns and how you can make the use of this trend to increase your personal project management toolbox size. Today, together with me, is my colleague Gregor Diem, who will do a short presentation about the hybrid project management and will share with us the results from his recent research on this topic. In the following discussion, we will welcome my colleagues Mirei Boom, Attica Seigel, and Markus Stedel, experts in various industries such as insurance, IT consulting, and e-commerce. They will be happy to talk about their view of the topic and will also can answer your question. I also encourage you to take a part in the discussion about the hybrid project management and share, of course, your experience and lessons learned. I would like to remind everyone with PMI certificates that you get one PDU at the end of the panel. So without losing more time on this introduction, I would like to welcome Jörg Glunde, our PMI Southern Germany Chapter President, who found time to attend at our event to say a few words in the beginning. Mr. President, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Stanimir. Hello, good morning to all participants. I'm very lucky that the online community managers from our PM community found the time and found the capacity to broadcast this discussion to you. And and I'm very happy that we have this specific small format of a small team, which on that side is some unique. So we have a uniqueness of this format in our chapter among all other event formats. It is cool and it's good that our small team of myPM community managers are doing this and doing this great job. Thank you very much to all of them, and happy discussion and happy event.
Thank you, Mr. Glunde, for these kind words and for your support to our panel and our small team. Now I'm heading over Gregor, who will tell us more about his research and what conclusions he made of this. Gregor?
Thanks, Dan. Fantastic. Yeah, so I'm Gregor Diem, and maybe to start with the topic, how did I get to this topic? Well, I work for a large insurance company, and there we are in the middle of a transformation, which we already actually do since a couple of years. And as you can imagine, when you do such a transformation, you have to deal with a lot of topics and sub-work streams like organizational changes, IT systems, which was part of the scope to bring in, processes had to be redesigned, and so on. And of course, then you're looking for the right project management approach. And so how did I get to this topic? Well, we learned over the course of this transformation that there is probably no one right answer, and things also change over the time. And probably depending on the situation, it makes sense to adjust. And so I believe personally that, especially in the future of project management, becomes more and more important that a project manager basically is looking to the situation he or she is in, and then is drawing the right conclusion how to organize the project, what kind of tools to use. And yeah, so this brings us directly to the topic of hybrid project management. I think what is also important to consider is that this kind of decision is not probably a static decision, but environments, especially on a larger transformation like I'm in, are changing. And then, of course, you should adjust accordingly. So this is how I get basically to this topic, and that also led basically me to research a little bit deeper into this topic. So I made a survey, And as a starting, before we then go into the panel discussion, I would like to share with you my results and what I found so far, which is then, I think, a good basis for further discussions. All right, so what are the topics I would like to cover quickly with you as a starting point? Of course, we'll look into what is hybrid project management, what is our definition of that, then have a look of the different models, so ideas how hybrid project management could look like. Then I would like to introduce you to this Cynefin framework, which helps us maybe also later in the discussion to classify and make sense of different situations we are in. Then let's have a quick look to combination patterns, and then let's have a look to the results I found from the survey. Of course, there is quite a bit of information. We probably cannot look to all of it, but let's take one or the other aspect out of it so we then in the panel can take it further and have further discussions. All right, with this, let's jump into the topic right away and let's discuss what is hybrid project management. I like the definition of Timminger. Timminger is a professor at the Fachhochschule here, Fachhochschule Landshut here near Munich. And so he basically defined hybrid project management in a way that whenever different methods, roles, processes, tools are combined in project management, so different standards or process models are combined, then actually we have hybrid project management. So most recently, of course, we have the discussion on agile and traditional project management, and so quite often, different work streams or different parts of the project are combined either by using traditional project management approaches, and other aspects maybe use agile project management approaches, and then we could say we have formed a hybrid project management approach. Yeah, so this also then caught my interest, and as I said, is also subject to my survey I've carried out, which is basically then researching or looking into the topic. So how is actually hybrid project management used out there in practice? And so basically, what is the patterns which are used out there in practice? Yeah, before we look into that in more detail, let's have a quick look, just the idea how project management developed. Of course, we had the waterfall model really being established more formally in the 70s, and then this was developed further with V-model and spiral model. And then, of course, as probably all of you know, the big drawback of the waterfall model is that the customer interaction was not as well integrated as needed. So then other aspects have been brought up, like rapid prototyping, or also the rational unified process coming more from the software side, which then at the end led to the agile approaches as we know them today, like Scrum and so on. And so this is basically how it developed over the time. But more recently, maybe since the last 5 to 7 years, practitioners also combine approaches, especially for larger projects and programs. And so that is what is hybrid project management all about. And quite often we see a model which is, in academia at least, identified as Water-Scrum-Fall. We look into this in a second and see whether this is familiar to you as well. Yeah, before we, however, look into the details of the combination patterns, let's have a quick look to the Cynefin framework. So the Cynefin framework is basically comes from complexity theory and is trying to classify different complexity situations. And I think for project management, this is quite important because depending on the situation, you probably have to choose a different approach or structure different tools in a different way to get the most effective outcome. So to stay here in the example, the Cynefin framework is basically using a 4-quadrant approach to make sense of the situation. It starts with basically the simple approach where cause and effect is clearly identifiable. So things are very repeatable. You can do things again over and over again, and you get a very good result each time. And this is normally then, highlighted with where you can apply best practice. A very simple approach. So if you have a open window and you get a current in there, right? The obvious thing is to basically close the window to get rid of the current, right? You could now start, of course, to identify and research and get a better understanding why is the air coming in and put some plastic folder to fix it, but it's so obvious, right? You can close the windows, problem solved. And then in this situation, which is classified as being very stable, it's an ordered, repeatable situation where you have cause and effect, yes, you can plan things very well. And to be honest, traditional project management then makes a lot of sense in this context because a lot of things are clearly predictable. Now, when we move to the next stage, the complicated stage, cause and effects are not that clearly identifiable anymore, and you need to analyze the situation a little bit. So you normally go with a pattern, you make sense of the situation, you analyze the situation, then you basically find the best solution to it, right? And to some degree then traditional project management also works very well in there. If you have a good planning, you maybe find out how to deal with the complexity in the situation, then if you get also the stable result. However, when you get into complex situations where things are unordered, where things are fluid, cause and effect is not so clear anymore. Of course, then traditional project management is struggling with that because you base a lot of decisions, a lot of plannings on certain assumptions, on things that should work out exactly in this way. And then, of course, it makes sense to work more towards the agile approach where you use smaller iterations, where you then also have maybe experiments. So you try something out, which is not the big thing, the big assumption you make or the entire project then is based on, for example, in a software, a certain design, and you make sure that it works. And things which maybe don't work out, so maybe you have even 2 or 3 options, right? You exclude because you tested them on a small scale, and therefore you make sure that you found the best fit to your situation. The third one is the chaotic situation that is characterized by, it's really unordered, there is no clear cause and effect, there is no right answer, there is chaos. And there it's characterized that the best reaction to that is directive interventions where you basically get a clear instruction to manage the situation. An example would be, I think in the Munich airport in 2012, there was an issue with the radar, right? The radar was basically breaking, collapsing, and basically the airport was out of control for a couple of hours. And so then the emergency programs took place, and basically one of the first decisions was like, we completely lock down the Munich airport, we deviate and get all airplanes out of the Munich airspace. They should go to Stuttgart and other airports to basically secure the situation. And this is a first measure then which basically secured the situation, right? And because you couldn't really analyze anymore what happened, what was the reason and so on. It's a dangerous situation. So then you basically have to act quickly. And this all maybe sounds similar or familiar with you. In project management, maybe we also have these chaotic situations where we need to get a clear solution, right? But we also maybe have simple situations. So depending on the situations you're in, that's the idea, you should use the right approach. And the thing is, in project management, we very often start with an unclear and ambiguous situation. That's why the disorder of this Cynefin framework is in the middle. And it takes maybe a little bit of time until you realize, is it simple? Is it complicated? Is it a complex or even a chaotic situation? So the disorder is not a sustainable long-term situation, but a starting point And quite often then you need to divert to the right, context to then make the right conclusions. That's a little bit the background on what complexity theory gives us, and gives us some guidance on how we should basically adjust the way how we work on projects and in projects accordingly to get the best outcome. So maybe we can think that and keep that in mind for our discussion later, that research says that there is no one size fits all, and it's very much driven by the situation. Coming back then to our hybrid project management topic. So what is this? So I already mentioned there is one definition which basically says when you combine different approaches, so like here what you can see, waterfall and the Scrum in that case, then we establish hybrid project management. Now the question is, how can we do this? I think there are three generic combination patterns which are obvious. Probably there are more, but what I basically have encountered is three. One is that you do things in sequence. So for example, you could do an agile project management approach in the beginning to develop a system, right? Because a lot of things are uncertain. And then things become more clear and you want to roll it out. And you actually don't want to add more complexity by getting more and more user requirements in. At some point of time, you say, I have developed the system. Now this is the ready product for the project or the program. We want now to roll out in a standardized approach the system, and therefore we go into waterfall. We know how it works. We know how we need to configure it. It's really about getting speed and scale the rollout. Could be one idea. And to be honest, I have seen that in the transformation I'm in, that first we planned to plan everything. We couldn't because there was too much complexity, too much uncertainty. Then we went to the agile approach. I think then it worked better. But then when we want to roll it out and we set the expectations to our companies out there that they still can change everything and basics of the design, right? Then again, it becomes a situation that we cannot scale the rollout. And therefore then probably it makes sense then to say like, no, that's the product, that's our standard development. Yes, we will develop it further, but this will be another project or another instance. Now we want to get and scale basically your rollout, and therefore we go into a waterfall approach. And yeah, very often I've seen a Water-Scrum-Fall where you maybe define first the big milestones, what you want to do. Then you use maybe Scrum if it's an IT related rollout or system development to develop it. But then very often you get into fall again, because at least in our company, although we moved just now to a monthly release cycle, we're still need to manage our releases. So everything we develop maybe in sprints of 2 weeks, we need to wait for the next release to get it in, right? So I think that's a very common pattern I have observed. Yeah. Next one is parallel, that you really split, that you say one part is really waterfall, the other one is agile. And I've seen that pattern in, for example, the mobile development industry, where the hardware is pretty much developed on a waterfall approach, and the software part of it is developed with an agile approach, and then the product is put together towards the end. Yeah, so I have two different substreams, and they use different project management approaches. And then, of course, and this is actually also what we see most of the time, what I call a holistic integration. You take best approaches and combine things. So you have maybe a daily stand-up in a normal organized waterfall project, or a Kanban board, or you have you use agile, but you still have your steering committee, which you don't have, right? But the organization requires it, and therefore you have combined this practice. All right, so these are basically three different combination patterns I have observed and I've seen. Let's have a quick look to the query and to the questionnaire I have mentioned. I've conducted, what did I do? I basically with the help also of PMI, sent out and requested project managers. So all of them were project managers who answered it, a big majority at least, and asked, so what is the state? Are you really fully traditional? That's the one extreme. Or are you fully agile? Or are you something in between? Do you mainly use traditional, and yes, you have some agile components? Or is it the opposite, is it the other way around? We are mainly agile and maybe have still some traditional components like the steering committee we need to report to. Or is it really balanced? And what I found interesting that the majority of the respondents said, no, we actually have a balanced situation, right? We use sometimes traditional, sometimes agile, and we couldn't really say mainly one or mainly the other, right? Although I have to say traditional is still quite prevalent and more prevalent than I've, to be honest, originally expected, but you need to see that I really used all industries, so including also industries like pharmaceutical, aerospace, insurance, of course. So it was really across various industry and not only software-oriented projects. So that's something that maybe you need to take into consideration when you look to this data. Yeah. Then I was interested in, so what kind of project management approaches are using. It's interesting also that the classical waterfall process is still quite high in use. Of course, as you can see here, you can also see, of course, that Scrum is very prevalent. Also, I think no big surprise. The other ones less used. So I also included maybe which are not really clearly project management approaches, DevOps and design thinking, because I think they are very often mixed in the combination of the approaches. So so really both Scrum on the Agile side, but also the classical waterfall model, both seem to be used and still is used quite often out there. And there is no one fits all or only the one thing which is now used out there, right? Which I find an interesting finding, combined with the insights that, yes, people basically combine approaches. And when I directly ask the people, so do you combine or you don't combine? Do you always keep the original? So original Scrum, original waterfall project according to PMI standards, let's say. Then the majority actually said, almost 80%, yes, no, we combine. We use best tools, best approaches, best fit things into our approach of project management, and we adjust it according what we think is the best situation. Which I find very interesting that it's 80%. 80% out there do some customization of their project management approach. Yeah, this refers a little bit to the information on what I've asked before. What is used? Do you combine? How do you combine? Do you combine in sequence, in parallel, or do you integrate the approaches? And also the majority set is really integration of the approach. So selection of the best breed, the best fit tools is basically what is applied most. Also, I think a very interesting finding that it's not really separated, like you use it in parallel or in sequence, but it's really combined according to the best fit need. Then I ask, so what are the typical challenges you have encountered? And we don't have the time, of course, to go all the items here, but let me just highlight a couple. Scope changes, no surprise, are one of the most prevalent topics. Communication seems to be a typical problem we have in project management. Deadlines is something which seem to be an ongoing issue, but also complexity and the resource situation seems to be a recurring problem. Now, what I think is becoming then a little bit more now into our discussion and the context is if we take these kind of questions and ask, so which one you think is better suited? Do you think this topic, this issue, like scope changes, is better addressed by agile approaches or better addressed by traditional approaches? And then, of course, no surprise that scope changes, I think this is the most classic one. Of course, the conclusion is that this is better addressed by than the agile approaches, as you can see here. Now, with other areas, it becomes interesting, and maybe that's a good then topic for discussion just in a minute, that it's not so clear. So prioritizing, I think it's half-half. However, when we look, for example, to risk management, I find this interesting that it looks like the majority believes that traditional project management has actually a benefit. And when I did some further interviews, so for example, with people in the pharmaceutical industry or the aerospace industry, they say, yeah, for us, it is quite important when we specify certain things and we plan certain things due to the high risk factor, right, they have in their products, that there is not too quickly change. So when we have to find a certain agreed requirement or thing which need to be fulfilled by the product, we cannot easily change it in an agile approach because we're running certain approval steps, even with the regulator and so on, so that we cannot really use agile entirely there because of the risk factor. And therefore, they believe that risk management in that situation is better covered by traditional project management. Yeah. So maybe this we can use as a foundation of our discussion now. So it looks like there are certain aspects which are better addressed by agile, some are better addressed by traditional, and some are not really conclusive. So when you look, for example, to team issues and so on, the majority sect actually, it's really the same. I can't really say what is better. Yeah? Or cultural issues, right? These soft factors. It's probably not driven by the methodology or by the approach or by the process, right? But others are. Yeah, so that is basically as a basis for our discussion what I wanted to share with you. And with this, maybe go into our panel discussion. And yeah, maybe start to ask the question. So what is your experience? Where do you see advantages and the disadvantages of traditional versus agile approaches? Yeah, maybe we start then with the panelists. If you could share some experiences on your side. Yeah, I'm just maybe picking Attika. What do you think? What are your experiences in the context of, when to use what kind of approach? Maybe in the area of requirements. I think you looked a bit on the requirements area. What is your experience?
Yeah, I did when I was working in, for example, like you mentioned in heavy products. I have some examples from there. For example, we can combine, like you mentioned, sometimes it's possible to combine waterfall and agile together. So in my previous experience in the previous company for a train, if you build a train, it's possible to combine certain aspects of both methodologies. For example, to have an overview of the plan, of the project plan, we can use waterfall methods, but then moving in, for example, for a software part of the train, we can use the agile method. So this can be combined, but mostly in heavy products, for example, it's waterfall that is prevalent. And yeah, and currently in e-commerce industry, what I noticed that they use, it's not specified, they use, for requirement management, they're using waterfall approach because once we set the requirements, it's set. It doesn't change much. But during the execution, they're using a lot of combinations. So there is no set pattern of a project management methodology. There is no one methodology that is being used, at least in these two industries that I noticed. Because
maybe Mireille.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. No, thank you very much, Attika. Mireille, I think you work pretty much on the agile side of things. What is your experience? Did you get any, issues sometimes on the agile side, or what are the benefits clearly you can see? Yeah, any insights from your?
Yeah, so from my perspective, actually, it's interesting. For a long time, I was in the banking industry and working in compliance, right? And it was not a pure agile perspective, but it was very interesting that the business side was very much waterfall, and the technology teams were in agile. So when you were showing earlier the hybrid, I think it was number 3, right? The hybrid where business management wanted to see steering committees and stakeholders and reports and things of that nature, we needed to have that, even though the technology side was very much just agile. So they had to fit in, they had to make sure that they fit in their sprints into traditional project plan that were defined planning analysis, you know, all of those very regular waterfall phases. So we had to do that. Currently, you're right that, again, it's a lot more agile in my current software company. We are very much going towards the agile part. However, again, we're looking at management, you know, top executive management that don't really want to see levels of details of how your sprint is doing. They want to understand, is my project going to deliver my requirements, and when is it going to be finished? So I think overall, even though when I was in compliance, it was the waterfall side was heavier because of all of the regulatory environment that we had to fit in. From a soft perspective, right now, the agile part is much more prevalent, very much in sprint planning, timeline that are a bit more fluid in the sense of you're not sure how much you're going to get in the end within your time frame, how much of the requirements are going to be able to fit in within your time frame, but still with a little layer of, hey, you know, upper management wants to know how the project is doing and what are we going to get by the time frame. Does that answer your question?
So excellent. So you think there is a little bit on the software, the core project team, right? Agile would work very well, but there's still the need for management, middle management, top management to get transparency. And hence we default back to the established processes and reporting structures, right? And then with that integrate both.
Totally. Yeah. And I think there's a large struggle for project managers to be able to combine the updates that they're getting from the development teams that are fully agile and try to take that information to put it back into something that is usable for management. I've seen that struggle in actually two of the major 3 companies that I work with, where development teams could not feed back their head into, hey, this is what the management wants to know. It's great that you have the details in Jira and that you're managing everything in Jira being one of the tools, right? You could put it into any tools, but they were more into that frame of mind and could not fit it back into, but I really need to get something to management, and that does not work for me. So a lot of the time, the project manager to me is the person is caught between those 2 areas and need to figure out how to make the reporting work on both sides and be the translator so that development team can find their pieces in there, but management gets their understanding of how the project is going.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe Stan, what do you think in your context? You work in the leisure industry, right? How does it fit in your context?
It's more like hospitality industry.
Hospitality, yeah.
Yeah, we are developing virtual reality for hotels, and there is 3 components based in our product. One is hardware part, one is software platform, and the 3rd component is the content of this software platform. When you're working on the hardware part, we're using mostly the waterfall approach. which following the sequence of the things that need to be done. But for the software part, we're using mostly agile approach. But interesting part is for the content of this software platform, because there you can combine many methodologies in order to meet the client requirements. But sometimes it's very complicated. I want to ask Jörg about his opinion on this topic.
Yeah, I think Jörg, you mentioned you have done a hybrid project in Austria, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Because you're a bigger expert than us.
No, just kidding, Stanimir. Huh? This hybrid approach was indeed an SAP implementation project, and we tried a thing which was the character of a hybrid one. That means that we definitely work in iterations, and in each of these iterations we defined this scope a little bit different. So I think, but yeah, you can't do real agile work in that topic. Because you have a clear budget, you have a clear time frame, and but what I can say, there is a combination that means if you have the rules, the big regular things around like time frame and like budget and so on. You can even use agile practices to work with requirements, to work with scope, to work with scope changes in these specific iterations. So that is a benefit of using agile approaches in a more away waterfall work. So like disciplined agile approaches also do. You can both things of both worlds. So this is I think we had some benefits there in case of, let me say, more freedom to drive through this specific iterations. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. And do you think it sounded a little bit like you did this Water-Scrum-Fall? So is it like the big milestones, right, which are maybe driven by the big deliverables you have committed to, budgets you have to make sure you're not exceeding, right? This is done in a traditional framework, including probably then some reporting to finance and so on.
Yeah, I would say that.
The details, so the where to put the button in the system, right, and what is the best user interface approach, right? That is something you can very well do then in an agile approach, because of course this is not a milestone work. So is that the conclusion a little bit, that we could say, in larger transformations or companies where budgets are very important, yes, it needs to have the framework to meet these requirements, also on information to management, but then the nitty-gritty details, which maybe also change because we get feedback, right? That is done in an agile approach?
Yeah, I think we were not pretty much like that. We were with parts of the project. We had this Kanban approach, yeah, and but not with all parts of the project. So in this formal project, we can't really say that is a definitely 100% Water-Scrum-Fall. So, but what you could say is that in parts of projects that worked like similar like that. So I would say it would be a benefit for even larger organizations to have this hard rule set, yeah, and but then in these body of the project and these iterations, you could use any agile Kanban X, Y, Z approach to even go faster, be more flexible, be more agile. I think that could be an approach. What we do now next at Zeppelin with the next project, because it's a little bit more complex one, because we have not a small firm, a small company, a small subsidiary to provide. We have to provide a bigger one, but even there we will do some from the Spotify model there to combine that with the given frames. So this is a cool interpretation of hybrid as well. So you can you don't have to use Scrum, for example. You can also use other ideas, other models, which is all by the way mentioned in the Disciplined Agile book. Okay.
And maybe one question. So the idea is that then with this you scale the agile approach, or is it so you bring it into the organization on a scaled level? So because you have not only the one thing you want to organize, the one product which is isolated from everything else, but you have also sometimes maybe, I don't know, in your industry, right, a bigger project which is combined of different sub projects which you then need to scale. Is that then the idea to use then something like or components from Spotify to achieve that?
Yeah, that is the primary goal to scale in that specific project approach we want to use for the upcoming SAP project. But if we come to a cool conclusion, then we could also use this approach to other projects in the organization. So this is not set everywhere. So this is just a start, and it's a revolutionary start, I would say. So, but you could use it for scale up. Yeah, that's right.
Excellent. Coming back a little bit to what we discussed in the presentation. So with regards to in which situation you think it makes most sense to use what kind of approach? Can we have a little bit of discussion here on this one? So when you have simple and clear issues, right, or project goals to fulfill, what do you think? What makes most sense here to use, and then compared to when it gets complicated, so complexity is increasing but still manageable, versus to really complex things. You don't know yet really how things relate to each other. What would be your advice or your experience from your project management work? Maybe Marco, if you have some ideas around that. So do you adjust the way how you work when you have different situations?
Yeah, definitely. So it's nowadays it's definitely required to adjust yourself and adjust your way of working as soon as you face problems. And especially when you work on a very complex project. So my experience is more or less with the IT outsourcing projects, which are quite complex and which are following mostly the classical approach of traditional project management. And sometimes, of course, you come to a point where you have to make a decision. If you go, for example, with solution A or B, and in better words, whatever, if you go with a cloud solution or an hybrid solution or an on-premise solution, for example, then you have to be able to determine all the requirements upfront, and sometimes not all the requirements can be determined upfront. And in this case, it's a good idea maybe to run a small spike which is a very short sprint of where you determine all the requirements, or where you get time yourself and to try out an agile methodology to collect information about requirements from a technical standpoint, as well as for risk, which might impact your project goal to be successful at the end. And of course, the spike also could fail at the end, but then you at least got the experience that you should not continue with this whatever proposal which you thought first that this would be the best idea to solve this problem. And if you succeed, and if you get the outcome of the spike, that yeah, you should implement this kind of solution somehow into your traditional outsourcing goals, and you should proceed it further, and then you can implement it much easier into your traditional project management way of working then. So this would be definitely a good example from the outsourcing world, and as well another thing, for example, when it comes to troubleshooting for any kind of IT related problem, then you also can or most of us are already following a kind of an agile troubleshooting methodology, because for example, in the morning you face a problem, and then 3 hours or 4 hours later you usually have a general talk about the progress, what happened so far, did you find anything, what could be the cause of it. So this is already a kind of an agile approach. So, and if you implement this further and follow more the sprint related approach, then you can make more get more benefits out of it, and can up with a proper solution faster. And this ends up, of course, at the end in avoiding waste of time and reducing the risk that the project goal yeah, will not be or will not get implemented in time at the end.
So what I just heard from you reminds me a little bit on you know, the pattern I introduced here, the combination pattern in sequence. So if I get you correctly, especially when you have outsourcing, an outsourcing situation where you need certain stability towards then when you get into a contract, right? And need to agree what is really delivered. But you're in a situation in the very beginning where things are very, you know, fluid and not very well defined. You could start with Agile, get that more, you know, better understanding of what is really needed, what are the requirements, you know, work on the first solution. And then when you have to get this into a contract, you get into more waterfall style of project management approach, because, yeah, things then need to be fixed, right, and agreed, and cannot be, you know, changed that quickly anymore. Did I get that right? Was that the thinking?
Yeah, that's definitely an example for the combination of tradition in sequence. And another example for the sequence approach would be also if you want to foster your agility within your enterprise. So, of course, you don't know everything what you want to change at the beginning. So, and to determine the objectives you probably want to adjust somehow, then starting with an agile approach is always the good option. And as soon as you know what you want to change and by when you want to get a change, then you can transfer it into a waterfall approach when it comes then also to change management and so on, to make sure that your employment force is fully aware and follows your overall targets then.
Absolutely. So
I have one question for you, Gregor.
Yeah.
If we get back to our discussion, if you remember a few weeks ago, when we make comments about the survey results, we get to the conclusion with you that maybe we are in the beginning of one major transformation towards Agile, especially after disciplined Agile announcement from the PMI and things like this. That do you think that we are in the beginning of some kind of, how to say, a major transformation to kind of agile working way? And do you think that especially PMI trying to find a way to make agile more major approach to the projects?
I think so, yes. So because our environment out there, of course, has a higher dynamic than the years before, for various reasons, right? I think for sure, because things move from not so much simple anymore, from complicated more to complex, right? Things are more uncertain. There is a higher need for agility.
Mm-hmm.
But what I also think is it's not always just agile is on the higher agility is needed, right? As we just saw, right? Because for some situations when we need to have and go back and put things into a contractual relationship, right? You want things solid. You want things not to be blurred or undetermined or subject to some interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of a knowledge issue, and therefore then you have to get into the experience basically, then conclude from there to then really put the right thing. In that case, it was the outsourcing contract. However, what I think is really the future is that yes, there is a higher agility needed, and we need to move towards agile practices, no doubt. But I also think it's always changing, right? And the context is changing. And I think I alluded to that a little bit in the very beginning. In my case, in my company, where we started to basically think that to plan a transformation is, well, for sure not simple, but it's complicated. So you can try to plan everything through. And at the end, actually turned out it's highly complex. We cannot plan everything through. We have to slice and dice the topics, work out, and as I mentioned, have this maybe safe fail experiments. Say, well, I don't know what the best user interaction is. Is it A, B, or C? And maybe also there are different opinions out there, right? So let's just try it out, but make sure we are not spending a lot of money yet in designing the entire system like this, but let's have a small, with agile techniques, maybe other techniques like design thinking, test, and then get from complex situation into complicated towards more the simple, when we then concluded the right, activities and outcome. And the challenge, I think, is that this kind of conclusion is unfortunately also not static, right? So you might, to make an example, find the best solution for, in my case now, an HR IT system in one country, right? And then you move to a completely new environment, let's say from Europe to Asia, and suddenly the assumption you put into place does not hold perfectly anymore, right? And then I think you need to be flexible enough to say, okay, it looks like we have developed something which is fine for, the target we intended to develop it, but now we get into a new environment where it maybe does not fit, and then maybe we should again switch back and change into the agile complex environment to tackle with this non-fit, right? And then find the solution and then go back again to basically something stable, because I think there is no beauty of agility per se, right? The idea is that you are agile because you have to deal with certain complexities. At the end, of course, things are simpler to organize as such if you have a stable environment. The truth is you don't, right? So, and the question is, how can you deal with it? If in a perfect world, right? If you could really plan everything perfectly without assumptions and so on, you would not need to have agility because you know the best solution and the best fit right from the start. But the reality is different. That's not the case. And therefore, I think this flexibility to make sense of your situation and then adjust your approach, I think is probably what we need to incorporate into the future of project management even more, and maybe help also our project managers with guiding principles when to do what. Because ideally, people who have not yet the experience, they of course, need to piggyback on some other experiences, right? In the form of some best practice or standards or some guidance or guiding principles, which would help you then to identify your situation and then, adjust accordingly. But I think the spirit for, I just don't go in a situation. It doesn't really matter if now agile, traditional, whatever. I just apply it like a recipe, like you do your baking of something. Where we have already mixed recipe, right? That doesn't fit if your environment is not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I think, the trend is towards getting the kind of the awareness of project managers. Think of your situation, conclude that is it complex, complicated, or maybe just simple, and then adjust accordingly. That I think is what we need to establish further. I'm opening
just one thing I would like to say to all our participants that the PDU claim code is in the chat. You can copy from there. And also, if someone of you want to add something to our discussion, is more than welcome.
Yep. Thanks, Dan. So maybe we open up the round now that we have, I think, touched a couple of topics to the audience. If you have any things to add, any experience to share, or any questions on things we have discussed, looking towards the time. We have a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, but you all are welcome to say something about this, to our topic, because obviously this discussion is endless.
Absolutely. There is nothing you can entirely conclude today, and I think there are many, many different angles of the same topic, and I think a lot of things which are, will be developed further. So there are any questions from the audience on the topics we have discussed, or any experience you would like to share? Please unmute yourself and feel free to ask the question.
Or we were detailed enough with our discussion so far.
I think, I don't know, there's nobody who wants to talk. Okay, then we can wrap it up.
Just a short question, Archika. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Jörg.
Yeah, go ahead, Jörg.
Yeah. So my question would be, what do you see now? Is it, do you see, are there any experiences about companies, organizations which use more or less a hybrid approach? Are they working out the results in a better way? Would that help now to come out of this Corona thing with also approaches like distributed agile or other hybrid approaches? Do you see the benefit for organizations? That would be my question. If you have there some numbers, or I don't know.
I think for disciplined agile, it's too early to say that is there a successful implementation or not, in my opinion, because we're just at the beginning of everything, basically. Even this Corona thing, it's not yet finished. So I think the conclusions about the approach in the time of Corona crisis will be in the next maybe 1 or 2 years. That's what I'm thinking.
Two things that I wanted to add to that. First, being related to your topic. So far, in the 15 years of project management that I've done, every organization that went and adopted Agile in some form of fashion, mostly hybrid, have not gone back to traditional, especially whenever there's software included. Folks are not going back to traditional because Agile offers the ability to respond to situations and changes and issues, and you do get faster development, more responsive development. So that's my personal my personal view on this and experience on this. Second, not related to the topic, but we, as I'm one of the panelist volunteers, right? We would love to be able to continue doing those conversations, but we would also like to see what the participants would like in terms of topics for us to discuss in the future or prepare for you guys in the future. So feel free to reach out to any of the participants, or you had the email of Gregor on the first page, or through our LinkedIn page, so that we can continue those conversations in the future.
Yeah, you can post your questions or topic suggestions also in our group in LinkedIn.
Yeah, we're always looking for topics, and yeah, so I think a lot of topics are also around the area of how we can scale Agile, which could be a good idea, because I think, at least what I can see, many companies now are experimenting with this scaling of Agile activities, which I think is another interesting trend worth having a good discussion on.
All right, we have a question, I think, from Ruben Villarino. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's spend 1 minute on his question.
We can spend a minute on this question and then we can wrap it up. So do you see the chat? It says that it was mentioned that it is still common for the project manager to act as a translator in the communication between management using Waterfall and software development using Agile. It appears to me to be a quite manual work. What would the panelists recommend to automate or increase the efficiency of the communication? I think, in my opinion, it would be a greater, the main job of a project manager is integrator. So they have to switch between, communicate, bring ideas from all the teams and bring it to a one cohesive whole. So this is, I would say, a normal job of a project manager to integrate stuff, integrator.
Let me also comment on that. I had to do that role several times, and I must admit that it is manual work. So far, I have not found a tool or a software, or maybe let's put it this way, the companies that I work with were not interested in investing, if there are out there some good tools in order to be able to automate that process quite a bit. So yeah, so far it's been very much manual, and also manual in the sense of every time what management requires and the level of management also that was reported to was different. So very much customized to the audience, between the steering committee, the upper management, the sponsor. So always being done manually so far, at least from my experience. But if anybody knows of a good tool that can be used to do that, I'm all open to hear it.
I also think that the manual element will be always in case.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, with
I agree.
artificial
Unfortunately.
intelligence, there may be changes coming up there, but I haven't seen yet something when I was researching artificial intelligence for that. I have not seen yet some kind of consensus around what could work for a lot of various situations.
No, I think we're
So
too far.
I'm still looking out there.
We're too far from this point. Artificial
Yeah.
intelligence.
Yep. And I think we're running over time now, so I think we need to wrap it up.
We're all right. Then we wrap it up.
You have the code, PG code, everyone.
Yeah. Also from my side, thank you very much for dialing in. I think it was a very good discussion. We got also some insights on the outsourcing side, when to use basically and change the approaches where it makes sense. I think this was excellent input. I hope you enjoyed that. And yeah, as mentioned, please let us know of topics you would like maybe in this format to have looked into a little bit in more details. And we're happy to basically take new topics and then come up with a new agenda and online community forum. So thank you very much from my side for dialing in, and looking forward then to speak to you and see you in the future.
Yeah, I also thank you from my side, and it was one really useful and interesting discussion according to me.
All right. Until next time, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks.
Bye.